aren't we between right before the reception? Right?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
people are really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm being told 1 second.
We're good to go.
We're good to go? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And, thanks so much for taking the time to join us for this important conversation. In case any of you were wondering, I'm not Adler Coffey or Barbara Dalio. Unfortunately, they were supposed to be with us today, but they got exposed to COVID. And so, out of respect for all of you, at the last minute, they decided that it would probably be best to pass the torch to somebody far less capable than what they are. So you get me, and I'll certainly do the best that I can in steering this very important conversation. But the important thing is not about me. You get three incredible panelists that I think are going to have an amazing discussion about this report that they commissioned, about this crisis that we have in Connecticut, and maybe some enlightening ways of how we can address it and move forward. So what I want to do first is just introduce, I'm going to jump around in my introductions. We're going to go ladies first, but with Jeannie Milstein with us today. Jeannie was Connecticut's child advocate for 12 years. So that's quite a term of service, helping children across the state, and she is currently the Director of Human Services for the City of New London, not too far from here. And unofficially, her title in New London is known as 1-800-CALL-JEANNIE, because she pretty much handles every single sidebar issue that comes that way. She works for a great mayor in Mike Passereau, but Mike will tell you that his right hand, left hand, and any other hand or arm that he could ever grow is Jeannie in New London. So we're blessed to have you. And right here to my immediate right is Mayor Luke Bronin, two-term mayor of Hartford, correct? Getting ready to finish up his second term. Luke also, many of you may know, is a Rhodes Scholar. I don't know how many Rhodes Scholars we've had as mayors in this state, but he's, if not the only one, he's certainly one of the very few. Luke was counsel to former Governor Dan Malloy, and probably Luke's most important and prestigious title that he's ever held is he was also for 2 terms the president of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. So that should probably be at the top of your letter, definitely, you know. And then, you know, in the middle we have Joshua Brown. And I'm gonna start this conversation with Joshua a little different because, well, Jeannie and Luke and many others that we've met with around the state are subject matter experts in this field, and Josh is as well. He's also probably the only panelist that we've had that 119,000 disconnected youth that report talks about, he lived it. That was Josh. That was his life. That was his reality. So instead of jumping right in to the report, instead of jumping right into the solutions or the work that's being done, what I want to jump into, Josh, if it's okay with you, is the authenticity. So you can talk to our folks and tell them about these kids, who we're really talking about, because you were that kid. So if you take a little time just to share your story.
And I actually say now, I tell the kids, I'm you, you're me, especially the ones that, as we start disconnected, disengaged. Brief little history about myself, and I'll try to keep it short. 13 years of my life, and I say that slightly because ever since I was kind of born, I was like moving around, so it was really no stable homes. But 13 years out of my life, I was homeless, so that was local shelters, cars, people that you call family because we really didn't have too much family. So single mother raising 3 kids on her own. I have 2 other siblings. Lost my father very young. I was 8, 3 years before my birthday. On July 4th. And my mother and my father had a 30-year age gap. So, and I speak about these things because a lot of this stuff does, go on, and there's a lot of disconnected and disengaged youth that people don't get to because you don't know about these things, you know. I'm an outreach worker right now, and I know we're going to get all into the gist of, because you heard the bad things, but I'm an outreach worker for Domus, and one of the reasons why I am an outreach worker for Domus is because how long Domus has been involved with me. Being one of those youth, as I explained, being homeless, I didn't tell you how I was kicked out of pretty much every school at a time that I landed at Domus at a charter school that they had started when I was going to middle school. I was just getting out of elementary school, and they had created this charter school called Trailblazers to go to. And in and Mike can attest to what I'm saying as well, maybe about a month in, is when he found out that we were homeless, you know, and why. It wasn't because, you know, we came and just told him, or somebody came and told him right out, you know, well, why are you missing, you know, a week of school and it just started? And, you know, when John and Josh would leave, you know, we would want to walk home because we didn't want nobody to know where we were going. You know, as when we grew up, and, you know, I just throw this out there as well, DCF was considered to us destroying children and families. So my mom put in our head, like, you stay away from DCF. You can't tell the cops. You can't tell the school. You know, you can't tell people out that you know, because they might say something to somebody, and you really can't trust anyone. So, you know, as long as we had each other, and whether we're homeless, whether we're poor, whether we're not eating, you know, I can tell you no cash assistance. Why? Because then that gave the state access to where we would be at. You know, no housing, you know, no Section 8 voucher, no nothing. So these are the things that youths are going through nowadays as well, and it's like it's getting worse. You know, as you see from the surveys, the numbers are growing. You know, I can also tell you I spent a little time in juvenile detention. You know, all these things while growing up, and I always had an avenue to go to. You know, a man sitting in here today, he's the reason why I got my license after I cursed him out like pretty much every week. You know, and just trying to help me with my obstacles and myself being angry, you know, not navigating through these things, you know. And when I work with youth today, I hear a lot of people saying, like, well, why are they stealing these cars? And why are some of them doing this? It's so many things that are going on that people just don't know because nobody's getting to them. You know, we were just talking about this as well. And I don't want to, you know, talk too much because I'm going to tell you some good things that happened, you know, after all that. But a recent survey, you see just from New Haven alone, 400 youth in a year. It jumped from 300, from like 288 to like 567, 570 in a year. So these are kids that are couch surfing. They're at some relative's house or some friend that's not gonna tell that they're over there because maybe they don't want to lose their housing or what they have at the time. Maybe they might be sleeping in the car that they own. Some are at shelters, as we know. There's programs for the 18 to 25, but there's really no program for those that are younger unless you're in a family. You know, so if you can't go to a family shelter, where are the youth that are going that are homeless? You know, so that's why I'm big on, and we talked about this, having these nonprofits in pretty much every municipality, because I wouldn't have been able to tell anybody anything that was going on if Mike didn't follow me home, you know. And he had to get to the nitty gritty. He was like, okay, so do you want to make this worse, and then I have to contact the cops because it is my job? And I'm like, ugh. So me and John kind of had to tell him, and, you know, 25 years later, now he's my boss. After some certain things that I did to get myself on self-sufficiency, they were always there, you know, furnishing my first home, first apartment. And I'm not trying to get too, you know, emotional, but I thank them, you know, a lot. You know, let me give you just a little bit. I became a vice president in a local bank, you know, in my city with help from people like Domus. So that's just a small gist of it, and I'll go into that because, you know, I was homeless, but I'm a homeowner, you know, and it's a lot of other things that I get into too. But I don't want to talk too much because I know this is the panel and everybody got to speak. But I talk about this, but I left my briefcase upstairs. I walk around with my transcript, because my transcript will tell you, attests to my story. You know, my first 2.5 years in high school, all Fs. You know, over 400 absences in high school. You know, where did I graduate from? An alternative school. Who was my family advocate? Tom. Who's my supervisor now? Tom. So, you know, and that's after coming back and working in retail bank and wanting to give back to those that were just like myself, constantly getting, I don't want to say harassed about, hey, well, you know how it was as well, so why don't you hire some of these kids in the bank, which I did. So it's a lot of things that I can go on and on about, but that's just the gist of it, a little bit of it.
Well, Josh, I think that's why I wanted you to tell your story first, because I think not only is it authentic about who this population is, but it's also a message of hope for what can be done with this population when you see what you've done with your life, you know, coming from what these kids are dealing with. One of the things that I personally have found striking was that as we've done these regional conversations all across the state, and we've had these experts who have sat on these panels, all of which come at it from a different angle, but are all people who work in this. One of the questions that every single moderator has asked at the beginning of, when you saw this report commissioned by Dalio Education that talks about now 119,000 disconnected youth, did you find it shocking? Were you surprised? And let me just, because I want to throw this question to all of you, but what was interesting to me was almost every one of them to a T said, no, I wasn't surprised. And, you know, they shocking, sad, you know, crisis, whatever, but not surprised because we see it. What I found shocking about it was Dalio had done a similar report not that long ago, like in 2015, 2016, that had that number more around 40,000. So it's increased by 3 times, you know, since then. Our graduation rates for the first time in modern, you know, history that we can find are declining. You know, our rate of homeless population in this state for a decade declined. The last 2 years, it has increased. 1 year by 16%. And so to me, that was hard for me to hear all these experts working in this field saying, yeah, I'm not surprised by this. How could we not be shocked by this? I mean, when you see that massive, you know, all the numbers that were going in the right direction are now going in the wrong direction, and we have that much of an increase. For me, I think I was the only person that, you know, was part of those meetings that I sat there and said, nobody else is shocked. So I want to ask you guys generally in reading that report, throw it out to all 3 of you. Did you find any of this data not just to be troubling, but to be shocking or surprising? Or what was your general reaction when hearing these things? Jeannie, you want to start and maybe we'll just work our way
Sure,
down?
I'm happy to. First of all, Josh, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're an inspiration. That was
Appreciate that.
Very, very courageous. And if I could just I'll answer your question, but one observation. You know, as you were telling your story, it made me really think that every child needs a consistent, caring adult. That seemed to be the key to your success, Mike, Tom, names that you mentioned. And I use the word consistent because, you know, your story was about adults who were inconsistent in your life for so long and inconsistent housing and so on. So to be able to have that kind of compassion and also people who really believe in you. And I really am going to answer your question, but one quick story reminded me of when I was the child advocate. You know, I was visiting a young man in a correctional facility, and, you know, most of the time, and, you know, I was guilty of this, we would say to kids, so what's the matter? You know, what's going on? Or what's wrong? What's, you know? And I noticed that this little boy had a picture of a little baby on his little cubicle wall. And I thought, oh, who's that adorable little baby? And he smiled and he said, that's my son. You know, lady, no one's ever asked me about that. And I thought, wow, you know what? We have to change our narrative because we contribute to this 119,000. And I thought, instead of saying, what's the matter with you? We shift to what matters to you. And then you focus on the positive and not You know,
negative, right.
okay, because I know you're going to talk about that later. Like, what matters? Something matters to everybody, you know? So it's having that sort of frame, and that didn't answer your question, but I was not shocked by the data. And, you know, the numbers are going up. We're seeing more and more families who are homeless. We look at the price of housing, the price of heat, the price of food, the price of gas. You know, wages aren't keeping up with it. And you see a lot of single mothers, you know, working 2 jobs. The challenges are increasing. And so I wasn't shocked by it. The COVID, I mean, yes, COVID had an impact, but this was happening before COVID. And now we're seeing, the mayor and I were talking about this earlier, there's a cliff now with COVID benefits, and, you know, and sadly, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And
I mean, something that, I'll piggyback something that she was saying, that you got to have some type of support or somebody that, oh, like we say at Domus, you know, love lives here. You know, you have to know that someone loves you, that you can even go to them to get support. And they, again, we're big on that. The report, when it, I think, and I don't know if I can even share this, when I was out, they had to find people to get surveyed, you know, like, where are these kids, and you know, are they here in Stanford, or, you know, where are they staying? And, you know, they came and they tapped and they said, you know, can you find them? And I'm like, absolutely, I'll show you where they're at. You know, I'll bring you over to the shelter. You know, there's kids in my program stay in the shelter. There's some kids that might even be staying in cars now. You know, 18 years old, they can't go or don't want to go into a shelter because of ego or because some things that they've seen in the past and they felt like they never really got help before. Another thing that, and I forgot to mention this as well, and it is what it is. I had a single mother, but she also had issues. You know, she had a lot of mental illness that she was dealing with, a lot of depression. You know, that's why she drank every day. You know, every day, and that was something that she said she coped with. But this is going on in these households. You know, so I said this. And I don't want to, you know, we talked about this, Mike and all of us. I think this was around the time when we was doing the Reimagining Justice in Connecticut, and that was 2016 when we were talking about it. But I think it was Governor Malloy came up to Harvard. It was going to get worse, you know, because that's when I even started seeing it. You know, I got out of retail banking, my last stint. I was working at Santander. And I was like, Mike, what can I do? He's like, well, you know, if you want to get a job in the working in the group homes, and you know, I said I want to volunteer. He's like, I gotta pay you. So, you know, I was even seeing it then. You know, what about the guys that couldn't get to the group homes? You know, there was no place for them. And then, as we started seeing, the therapeutic group homes were being shut down. So a lot of guys and young women were just getting kicked to the curb. So, you know, or they had nowhere to go. Yeah, I wasn't too shocked that it was 119,000, and I hate to say it, you know, without more services, and I know there's like a lot of competing for like nonprofit money and stuff like that, but I believe if there's more services in the municipalities, like what we're basically doing, we can bring those numbers down. The proof is in the pudding, you know. Every kid that you even save from going to jail, that's $280,000 that the state is saving a year per youth, you know. That young man or young woman, 18 years old, 19, they get into an adult correctional setting, 80,000 a year, 90,000. So, you know, what if we can take 30,000 of that and reallocate that to them to get them services that they need, you know. But I don't want to get into the numbers things because I did that for about 10 years in retail banking. So, you know, we could. But no, I didn't really answer it off the back either, so don't feel bad. No, I wasn't shocked, Joe. I wasn't too shocked by it.
I don't know whether I was shocked by the number or not, but I think the report is pretty powerful in demonstrating that this is a challenge that we have to confront. And I think there were a few things about the report that may have been surprising or not, but are certainly important to emphasize. I mean, one is that this is not a problem in any particular community or in any particular type of community. It's a problem across the state. And, you see extreme levels of disengagement and disconnection in, rural eastern Connecticut towns, just as you do in the city that I serve, and many, many other communities, every community. That's one of the things that I think is really important to stress about the report, because I think as we deal with this issue, it's too easy for many people in many communities to think that's some other community's problem or somebody else's issue. But this report is pretty clear that this is everywhere. And it may not be visible or easily visible everywhere, but it's everywhere. And so that was one thing that I thought was really important and powerful about the report. The other thing is what Josh was just talking about. I actually think the numbers piece is really important to talk about. I think we all wish, I wish that the moral case was sufficient to drive us to action, that hearing a story like Josh's was sufficient to cause us to say we need to tackle this at a whole different level of investment, a whole different level of commitment and determination to change it. But it's not sufficient. What has to come alongside that, unfortunately, is a demonstration of why it makes sense economically. And the truth is it makes sense because the cost to the state in lost opportunity, in lost wages, as well as those direct expenditures that Josh talked about, is really, really high. And so, I think that's something else that I was really grateful for this report highlighting, because in order to support the young people who we should be supporting no matter what, we've got to make the case as to why it's the right use of resources, and I think it's a pretty compelling case. And I think that what Josh's story demonstrates, but what probably a number of folks, I see different people who I know, different programs that you're involved in, but one of the things we know is that you actually can successfily help young people re-engage and get back on track and find something that matters to them and go after it. We built our youth service corps to do that. I'd love to talk more about that. I won't do it in this answer, but our youth service corps is a piece of it. The work that ROCA, which works with young mothers in Hartford, does, that's another piece of it. But the other piece is that I think we have to recognize that a part of the reason we're failing at this, I think, is that we're not coordinating enough in our response. One of the ways, we've lost some progress when it comes to homelessness, and we're seeing the need rise. But one of the reasons that we actually made some really significant strides in combating homelessness in Connecticut is that we used the approach of the Coordinated Access Network, where it was on a regional basis, all of the providers that were working in that space came together with one organization at the center, the Coordinated, and they worked together to say, when there's a family or an individual experiencing homelessness, let's figure out what organization is best poised to serve that family. Let's figure out where the housing availability is, where the resources are, where the wrap is that we can use, and it was like an all-hands-on-deck effort, but in a coordinated way. This may be at a different scale, because we're talking about 119,000, but I actually think if we're going to address this, we have to take that same kind of approach. You have to coordinate amongst all of the extraordinary and sometimes very effective organizations that are doing this and say, how do we make sure that we are not letting young people slip through the cracks when there are so many good people doing this work? And then we got to resource it at a different level.
Yes, I agree with you as well. I'll second that. The CAN system, he broke down what the CAN system is. Heavily involved with that down in Fairfield County. Why? Because as the mayor is saying, it works, and I feel if we did have this type of structure for these disengaged and disconnected youth, disenfranchised, however you want to call it, it's across the board. It's all in Connecticut. And if we had that centralized, and I don't really, I'm not the operations person or the structural person to put it together, but if we did have that, I think we would bring those numbers down. And like you said, they're proof, the story. I will tell you. Now, I told you all those bad things. If this is the time to tell you now, I was able to not only just buy a home, I was able to pay a home off. Why? I know 30 years, I didn't want to be in no mortgage anyway. So I had to make sure within 7 years that I was able to pay this house off, working hard, making sure that, I had 2 jobs at a time. I wanted to make sure that principal was paid off, because I never wanted somebody to come and knock on, and nobody will ever and I'm saying this, and people say never say never. Yeah, let me tell you, nobody will ever be able to knock on my door and tell me that I have to go. And I say this, if I can't pay $5,000 in taxes a year, then maybe I shouldn't. I'll get a disability check or something happens. I'll never be kicked out of my home. And I'm really big on that, because for so many years, half of my life homeless, so the other half, though, again, with the right services, ambition, support, you can become something. I was actually an assistant vice president as well at a bank. I was recently given an honor award a couple years ago for community service. So all these things, it's proof,
So Jeannie, the mayor touched on it, Josh touched on it. Your prior work as the child advocate in that experience, can you articulate in some way where you see the gaps, where the gaps are in the collaboration and the coordination? What, for your experiences, where did those gaps exist? And not that expecting you to solve this whole problem, but your thoughts on how we tackle those gaps.
Well, I think the mayor, articulated that. The lack of coordination, the lack of communication, the lack of collaboration sometimes can be a huge barrier, both at a local and at a statewide level. And sometimes well-intentioned systems that are supposed to provide safety and care for kids sometimes further fail. So how we address those systemic issues too. Sometimes you have to shine a light on the actions that you're taking. And so there are a lot of gaps. But the mayor made me think of something based on the Coordinated Access Network. And this might be something we can all do in our local communities. We took that model and we expanded. We have an integrated health team in New London. So what we do is we meet with first responders, the nonprofit community, and hospitals. We meet once a month and we discuss people in our community who have been transported to the hospital on a very regular basis, usually for mental health or substance use issues. Although lately, for us, a lot of elderly with Alzheimer's and falling. And we get together once a month, we roll up our sleeves like the Coordinated Access Network, say, okay, who can do what for this person? Because what you find is this person, this nonprofit was doing this was doing this. And then if there were kids involved, another nonprofit was doing this. And this funding came from here, and the funding for the car. And we thought, but this doesn't make any sense. So let's all put our money on the table, like we talked about earlier, but on a very local level. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call this person at 3 o'clock every day because that's when they're lonely. And we reduced our transports by 75% in just a matter of a couple months. So it's making me think now, why don't we do this with some of our kids? And the way, I think, to engage them, because we do this with our opioid work, is to have people with lived experience. If I go talk to a kid who's disengaged, I'd be like, seriously? Are you kidding me? But if we get Josh to say, hey, and then sort of as a group, figure out what we can do together. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. I'm pitch hitting on this panel too. It's like I could never be, the panelists that were going to be here, but it's kind of making, it's an idea. I'm just
No, that
throwing
makes
out.
a lot of sense. I mean, like even now, if a youth came and say, we meet once a week where we'll say, okay, if we know a young man is, we'll get a report as well. We have a reentry program. So we'll get a report who's going to come out of incarceration 6 months ahead of time. We called them mentors at first, but a caseworker is sent up, and mainly right now it's Cheshire, because a lot of the young men are there, 18 and the 18 to 25 population that comes out of like the true unit sometimes. And if that young man is about to come out, that advocate is up there with them the first 6 months, before they come out. So why? Because when they do come out of jail, they already know they're going to have this advocate that's going to talk to them already working on housing. Where are you going to be working when you come out in 6 months? They're working on those things already. Meeting with them once a week while they're going to prison. So another example, that I can give you, if this young man does come to me, and maybe he might not be homeless, or he might not be eating, he might be able to eat every day, but he wants to find a way to get money. you know, and I don't want you to go sit out on the block. So guess what? I'm gonna refer you over there to Work and Learn so you can get a stipend every week, you know. So we have a Work and Learn program as well that'll give you, you know, a stipend every week to come in. Either you're working with your hands, or you want to go cook some food, or, you know, doing resume building. It's a wealth of things, but it's that centralized system. All these units working together. So I'll let you go, Mayor. So I don't keep talking.
No, you should keep talking. I think there are a number of things, but I think there are two very concrete things that I think we need to do in order to enable us to work in better coordination. And one is to allow school systems to share more information, and two is allow DCF to share more information. There is a huge lack of understanding about what information can be shared about young people. And there are good protection. There are protections for good reasons, but I think we need to take a really hard look at what the laws are currently that restrict data sharing. And then we need to make sure that there's a playbook that everybody understands what you can and what you can't share, because I cannot tell you the number of times when, you know, we encounter a young person who needs help and we can't quite figure out what's going on with them in school, whether they're under DCF supervision. And you have all these players, as Jeannie said, who are working in many cases with a young person, and nobody's talking to each other, but worse than that, nobody thinks they can talk to each other. And I think that has to be solved, and I would put that forward as something that CCM maybe should consider adding to a legislative agenda, because it is a very real obstacle to progress in some of this work. And then the other thing, which is not as concrete, but the conversation makes me think of it. You know, I think there are two places where the most disconnected young people often their disconnection first becomes clear. One is in school, and one is DCF, and it's often apparent quite early. Partly because of these restrictions on sharing information, we don't do enough to intervene early enough. And one of the things that I feel a really sort of profound sense of personal failure about is that, you know, we've worked really hard to try to create new avenues for young people, particularly those aged 16 to 24, to get reconnected. But in the meantime, every year there are more kids who are entering that age bracket who are disconnected. And what that means is that we've failed them along the way. The kids who are 16 now were 8 when I took office. And if they're still disconnected now, we really, really failed them. And that probably wasn't because there weren't, you know, 24 indications along the way that should have let us know just how much this young person was off track. And I do think the barriers and perceived barriers to information sharing are a part of the problem.
Can I talk about that for 1 second?
Of course.
Because, you know, there's always a lot of reports on the school to prison pipeline. Many years ago, when I was a child advocate, we did a report called From Trauma to Tragedy.
Yeah.
And it was about the DCF to prison pipeline. I think getting at your point, where we tracked the stories of 2 young girls who ended up in prison, and they were identified really early on as, you know, really needing a lot of support and help, as was their mother. But what the system did was hold the mother accountable, you know, and then the kids are fine, right? Because the mother's now, and it's so wrong. So I think that early identification, you know, that's why programs, some solution for prevention, home visiting, having somebody right there, like you said, when somebody's there in the prison helping, they know that person beforehand.
6 months
you know, prenatal with some of the vulnerable families. I don't know if that sort of addresses kind of what you were talking about a little bit.
So Jeannie, if I could jump on that a little bit. Obviously, we know there are groups like Domus doing great work out there, other nonprofits that are doing amazing work. But can we talk for just a minute from your perspective of what is the role of government? We talk a lot about the great work that the nonprofits are doing. We know the good work that our educators are doing in the classroom, if kids are in the classroom. But one of the things that I think I find striking as a layperson, so I put this out there saying I don't know, you know, exactly what our laws are, how they work, is our issue with truancy. I know some states that I'm very familiar with in the South that actually have laws that you get 3 unexcused absences. And at 3 unexcused absences, or at your 3rd unexcused absence, if it's not a doctor's note, if it's not a pre-approved absence from the principal, it automatically triggers a hearing. with the child and the guardian. And that's not a hearing to put somebody in jail or to punish them. It's a hearing to develop a plan to say, this child has now been truant for 3 times without an excuse, and we need to have a plan so this doesn't become something where they fall completely off of the map. I hear more and more stories of some of these kids who have fallen completely off of the map. So are we failing in the role of government? Do we not have the right programs in place that, you know, a teacher's got to teach the kids that are in the classroom. If a kid misses 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, most teachers don't have the capacity or the resources to go out and find that kid. Whose responsibility should it be? And should Connecticut be doing more or be doing a better job at tracking these kids and making sure that they don't fall off of the radar so easily?
Well, I think there's local government response, state government response, and a federal response. You know, from the feds, I would hope we get a lot more money than we get. Locally, what can government do? Government can help coordinate the nonprofits that are out there to make sure we're not duplicating services, to make sure that, you know, we're getting the most effective and efficient results. So I think that's one role government can play. We need more money for the schools to have more social workers and more paraprofessionals and folks who can identify and help engage with children and families, because if you help a child, you help a whole family. And we need a better system of data collection, and then somebody to look at the data on a regular basis to see what the trends are and what's going on. Because a lot of these kids who are homeless aren't even getting tracked. And so I think we need a better response. And then I think, you know, when I was on the panel in Wyndham, it was the superintendent, Wyndham, you were there, who said, this almost has to be like a COVID response now, you know, based on this report, that these state agencies all have to get together and say, okay, what can we do, not only in terms of financial resources, but in some systemic responses. But I think, you know, we're all municipalities here, so we see it we see it every day. It's right in front of us. And if you're at the state capitol, you don't see it like in your face as much as we all do. And we know the kids and we know the families. And sometimes I think, you know, like that going that local, almost like the police have precincts, you know, in neighborhoods. We do it. Hey, this is your area. This is your area. I don't know, but I'm curious to see what the mayor thinks about the role of government. I'm learning a lot here, but you know.
I mean, I wouldn't just limit the role of government to, you know, coordinating among the nonprofits. I definitely think that's part of it, but I also think that there is a role for local government to identify the gaps and then try to in service in their community and then try to fill them. You know, so I mentioned 2 of the things that we do in Hartford. We have our Hartford Youth Service Corps, which is something that my team and I built in part to address another issue that Josh was talking about. You were talking about, you know, some kids want to earn a paycheck, right? And so we were talking with many of the organizations that do violence intervention. And one of the things we repeatedly heard was, we just can't get these kids to engage. We have nothing to sort of compete with some of the other things that are pulling them a different direction. And so we wanted to compete. So we built a year-round part-time employment option that comes with, you know, connection to a really significant set of supports and mentorship and coaches. And when you become a Youth Service Corps member, you're part of a cohort, like a team within the broader Youth Service Corps, and you do work, you know, in the community that makes a difference. You can feel proud about, while at the same time earning a paycheck and getting that support. And most importantly, I think, making a plan for what's next, with the goal being either to go back to school if you're out, to go on to school if you're done and didn't continue, or to get a job or more. And it's had really, I mean, we want it to be better, but it's had really successful results in getting a lot of young people back on track. And that was a gap that we saw. And our role in that area was actually to do the fundraising, to do the philanthropic fundraising, to go to funders, to foundations, to philanthropy, and say, you know, we want to fill this gap, will you help us? And we've been able to do it. And then part 2 is then use that success to try to make the case to the state that this is something worth investing in as part of the state budget. And last year, for the first time, we got a modest allocation. It was $1 million statewide to support programs like this. But, you know, I hope that we can see that grow, both for the sake of the program that we started, but also so that more communities can replicate a model that's working. And I don't want to present it as, you know, the cure-all. But it's worked for a certain set of kids. the similar thing with the other program I mentioned, ROCA, which is their model is relentless outreach, and they just like with somebody who has a substance use disorder, sometimes it takes 5, 10, 15 times of reaching out and not giving up and knocking on that door, and that's what they do with young mothers who are in some of the most volatile situations, and they have a tremendous track record. But that was a gap that we together, and I should say, since the Dalio, since Dalio Education was going to be leading this panel, and they did this report, Barbara Dalio and Dalio was with us at the start of both of these things, and funding these things alongside others from the beginning, and working with us to identify the gaps. So I'm really grateful to them for their partnership on that. But I do think that part of the role of local government is to say, we got a gap here, and we need to fill it, and we're going to fill it however we can. And then the second piece is to make the case as articulately and as persuasively as we can for why we need to increase investments and demonstrate that they're effective. And then I do think the third is the things that you talked about, coordinating amongst the different players and trying to got as effectively as we can.
And
So
you're right
Josh,
about the gaps, yeah.
You're our non-government guy here, but you know all of the good work that Domus does
Yes,
for the communities that they're in.
absolutely.
So I ask you the same question. What about the communities that don't have a Domus, that don't have another nonprofit, that don't have somebody from the outside offering those services? Communities in the state that we know have the problem, because in the Dalio report, we've seen that it's across all 169 cities and towns. So we know nobody can say it's an urban problem, it's just a poor problem, it's everywhere. So we know that it's everywhere. But a community that has limited resources, maybe not because they're not wealthy, maybe just because they're small. Their government is small. They don't have a big government to deal with things. And they don't have these nonprofits offering those services. Then it's the same question, and what becomes the role of government or higher government? Should a child be able to not show up for school for whether it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, without any service being made aware of that, without the school picking up the phone and calling somebody? What should that process be to grab that kid before they're too far gone?
And something else that Domus we have two programs. It's the Domus Knights and Domus Vikings. It's in our high schools, and we spoke about it, like the guidance counselors, the teachers, they don't have time to really go out, and this kid misses 4 or 5 days. So the family advocate, we have the family, and we run into those problems too with the data sharing, because we'll be able to do a lot more if we could. But that family advocate actually goes out to that young man and young woman's house, or that destination where what we call sometimes a hot spot where they probably were staying, and find them. That's that outreach that is needed. You need these family advocates. I would tell the government or the local municipalities, because as the mayor is saying, a lot of this stuff comes from private funding. But I would tell them to invest in that. Invest in that model where you can have these family advocates that can go out and find these young men and women. Sometimes they go out and they find out that, hey, they wasn't coming to school because maybe there's a domestic issue going on in the home. And, it's probably not even mom and dad, but mom has a boyfriend that, something is going on, and, but I didn't come to school because I almost killed somebody last night, They tell this to the family advocate. This is why that person is probably depressed now. You have to have these people that can do this relentless outreach to go out to these young men and young women. I would tell them to invest in that model. Yeah. Put that money towards it. I know the guidance counselors don't have the time. I know the teachers don't have the time. I know the deans or the assistant principals, they probably don't have the time. Invest in that.
I agree with that. And just to stay on the truancy point, because I'm building off what you're saying. I think that you're right, Joe, to focus on truancy. I mean, it is staggering. The levels of truancy, especially post-pandemic, are crisis level. I mean, they were in my community crisis level pre-pandemic, but they're crisis level now in many, many places. And one of the things that was done some number of years ago was basically shifting responsibility for truancy onto youth service bureaus in communities. But that didn't come with resources. And I know we can't be just municipalities saying we need more money, we need more. But if there's a shift of responsibility, it's got to be resourced if it's going to work. And I think you pose a really important question that I think we need to wrestle with is at what level do legal consequences kick in of a different kind. But regardless of when those kick in, if the plan that you talked about, resulting from that intervention is to have any effectiveness, then there's got to be something behind it. It can't just be calling in someone to sit in, community court or family court or whatever it is and say, here's the plan with nothing else. Because if that was sufficient, that family wouldn't be in that position to begin with. So I do think that we have to recognize that that shift of responsibility came without adequate resources to carry out that responsibility, and that we should wrestle with the question you raise, but it's got to come along with the ability to support children and families in sticking to that plan afterwards.
I think a piece of that too, and you're absolutely right about that, is that we have to have some accountability too.
Right.
Sometimes we just give out money. I mean, we know that DOMAS produces such effective results in ROCA and the youth court. But I think we need to also look at the money we're spending now to say what's working and what's not working. Well, obviously there's a lot of things that aren't working, right? Because we have 119,000 kids, right? So let's look at what is working, and to your point earlier, and let's invest in that. And then have a good quality improvement mechanism to make sure that the practices are being implemented in the right ways. Because, policies and good ideas are only as good as the implementation of those, and there has to be efficacy to the model. So I think too, because we don't have a lot of money, we need more certainly, but we can look at some of what we're spending now.
Yeah, I don't want to ruffle, like city feathers or nothing like that, but that's something I say all the time too. Like, we run into the problem about sometimes about money, and I feel if it works, if it's working, you see that it's working, invest in it. I don't even know. I don't want to get into about the funding part, but even that program that I talked about is privately funded, and sometimes you'll even get it.
The richest state and the greatest nation in the world has a funding issue to deal with our kids. I mean, it's disheartening to hear.
It is.
And I don't think we can downplay the significance of the cliff that's coming. A lot of when you're talking about truancy or any of this other work, a lot of the work that's being done right now is being supported still today with ARPA dollars or with other forms of relief dollars, and those are going away. And we have to shine a light on it. We have to confront it because the need is not going away as quickly as the dollars are.
So I want to get to questions from the audience, but I don't want everybody to leave here with their heads hanging. We have, fortunately, from my perspective, 3 people who are very good at delivering messages of hope. Josh's life story is a message of hope. Jeannie is an advocate in the community. That's what you do, is you bring hope. And I will tell you, my experience with Mayor Bronin, well, he is a very pragmatic, I think, individual. He is also a very optimistic person. I will say that about, there are people who can drain the energy out of a room, and you are a very optimistic person. And what I find is, pessimism or skepticism often leads to anger. Anger is not very beneficial, but optimism and hope lead to productivity. And so what I want to ask each of you is to kind of give us your message of hope in this. What do you see that's working that can make it? I mean, like I said, your life story is a message of hope, but I want it because I know that you're all people who are optimistic, who do drive positive change, who bring positivity in our communities. Let's talk about that for just a moment. Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I mean, I think there are lots of reasons for it, but not without work, right? I mean, it can't be a passive optimism or hope. I think Josh's story, as you said, is a reason, but there are initiatives that are effective, that make a difference. And I think to Jeannie's point, you've got to reinforce success, and you've got to cut bait on failure, and you've got to reinforce success, and then you have to constantly try to get better. I mean, I guess one of the things that the youth service corps is really close to my heart. And one of my goals in this period of transition, out of office for me has been to try to make sure that it remains in a strong enough position going forward, or at least that the next administration has the ability to keep it going if they can. And so, we have set a really significant goal to sustain it through the next year and hopefully the following year after that. And that there's a big fundraising push right now. And I guess what I'm hopeful and optimistic about is that the response has been good. We've gone back to funders, we've gone to companies, we've gone to foundations and said, here is a program, here are the results. In this small city of 121,000 people, there are now 2,000 young people who have been part of the Hartford Youth Service Corps. And here's the percentage that have gone back to school. Here's the percentage that have gone on to school, gone on to work. And so the response has been good. I think that when you can lay out the case, a compelling case, that people want to step up and help, and hopefully we can have that same conversation at the state level and in the state budget process. So that's one reason. But the biggest reason is just the young people that I see, whether it's from a youth service corps or from local or a number of other efforts that happen in my city, where you really can see young people who were disconnected reconnect. And I don't even know, that feels like such a, I don't like that, I don't know if I like that word, but maybe this is, I'm going on too long now, but maybe this is sort of one way that I'm optimistic. And you tell me, Josh, whether this sort of is true from your experience. But I also think that very often when we talk about a young person who's gone through the kind of thing that you went through, I think there are a lot of people whose reaction is, it's probably too late. And it's never too late.
Never. No.
Right? There are lots of young people who get that after 13 years of living what you went through, you were able to get on the path that took you to where you are today. And I've seen so many other young people who've done that too. And I do think that we have a tendency, as horrible as it is, as a society, to sort of write people off. Yeah. And so what gives me hope is that there's so many examples of the fact that you should never write people off. No. And that gives me a lot of hope and optimism. But also, it's got to be a challenge to us to do this better.
Josh?
Well, first thing I wanted to say too is something that you brought up, Mr. Mayor, that was key, that Mike stresses with us at Domus. When people say like a kid is not, we don't have time to wait if they're ready or not. We just get to them. When we're talking about hope, and I always shy upon like saying this, and people be like, oh, you don't have to be so timid, and your story should get out there a little more. But I am hope. When we're talking about these programs and where I talk about where I work and what I do and why I do it, I am hope. Actually, my program is called Project New Hope. So it is an outreach program, and I don't talk too much just about my program. I talk about Domus as a whole because it's all these different entities that's of Domus that works. We have to wrap these services around these young men and these young women for them to have some hope. I do feel if we had, and try to not say this, like the mayor's youth services is dear to him. Domus is dear to me, and everybody knows why. I do feel if we did have more Domuses in more municipalities, these things would change. I am a living example. I can, and like I told you the bad, but I can also tell you the good. I can tell you the good on things now. And I live and I don't want everybody to walk out here, pity, because I tell people all the time, don't pity my story. Look at me, and that's why I thank God for. I thank God for Domus. I do, and other supports but they were a big part of me getting to where I'm at now. And one last thing I would like to say too, what also feels good too, like with working with Domus now. And oh my God, I said working with Domus now. If you guys know, it's almost 10 years now I've been doing, because I started literally while I was still in. But anyway, when I don't have to argue with people that really know what's going on, and let me break it down so you can understand it. When they know you, when they know where I can get to, imagine sitting across from people and people telling you that a young person, a young man or a young woman just won't make it. Like the mayor is saying, it feels good to me that I can sit across from somebody and I can say to him, well, I'll use myself. Josh just went to jail, or Josh went back to jail, but you know what, he's out now. We can still go find him a job. We can still, well, you know what, if Josh doesn't want to go work in retail or whatever, let's find him doing something with his hands, Let's make sure that he doesn't go back. And guess what, if he goes back or he goes and does this, we're going to still be right there with him. We say this thing about 18 to 26, and sometimes we get kicked in the behind because, for tracking and data purposes, we don't want to go over the age of 26, but, sometimes they might be 28, and I have to help you outside of the program, but we're going to get to you. Yeah. So, there's hope. It can happen. And there's a lot of me's that can come and sit in front of you too.
Yeah.
There's hope, and it can happen, and it just can. I'm a big believer of it. So,
Jeannie?
Well, Josh's story is hope, and countless other numbers of young adults who are so resilient, and so that gives me tremendous hope. And seeing, again, to your point, let's focus on, or my earlier point too, on what matters to you, what's important to you, how can we engage you? Maybe it's the arts, maybe then we know from our opioid work that relapse is part of recovery. So yeah, okay, you might fall down a little bit, but there's somebody there to help build you back up, focusing on your strengths. And sometimes too, with our ARPA money, the first question in my human services bucket was, whose idea was this? Because a lot of times it's people like us sitting in around the room, we're getting paid for our great ideas. But if you actually talk to people, whose idea was this? Oh, it was the people that we serve. You can learn so much. And what also gives me hope is how many people there are, like all of us in this room, who work so hard every single day, no matter what kind of job we have, but just to make sure that every young person, every family is able to live up to his or her potential, possibility, and promise. So knowing that we're all out there just trying to do that also gives me hope.
So an hour goes so fast, but I did want to give an opportunity for anybody in our audience that you had any questions for our panel members or comments. Oh, quite a few. Let's start here and work our way over. Is that okay?
So one thing I did not hear at the beginning of your whole panel discussion, which was wonderful, how are you defining disconnected youth? So I'm a public school teacher of 37 years. I have all kinds of definitions in my head, and I'm also an elected municipal leader, so I have that whole pot of definitions. How are we how do we solve a problem that we haven't, is it defined somewhere?
It is defined in the report.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can recite the definition precisely from memory, but you can. It's based on, age. If kids in school, then number of absences. If out of school, then connection to a job or to further school. But if you haven't, I should have said at the start. If you haven't read the report, it's worth reading the report because there's a lot in there.
The report breaks that down in all of those categories. Yes. Nick, ma'am?
Thank you. I appreciate this very much. What came to me as I was listening to this is that perhaps we know steps as to how to address this crisis. But the issue is how to pay for it, like the money issue. And then the other part that also came to me is we're not perhaps accounting for the lost potential, which is a great amount of money that is lost in who that person would become. That lost kid could be somebody who would invent something, who would be a president of something, who could have been a productive member of community in some way. And I'm sort of wondering if there is a way to calculate that into this accounting method that would be a good way into perhaps economically showing this cost a little bit differently so that it is then perhaps more convincing as to why do we need to invest in this.
Yeah, I think, again, it is in the report, you know, so that's another issue. For those watching at home, if they can't hear the questions, it was really a question about the lost opportunity cost of these children becoming disconnected, and it's staggering. And it is broken down in the report. You talked about it some at the beginning. I'll let you guys address it, but that's just, I wanted to give another plug for anyone who hasn't read the report. It really is, it's an easy read, it's a good read. Unfortunately, if the Dalio folks hadn't been exposed to COVID and they were here, they would have recited that answer very directly, but it is in there.
I think the answer to that is in the report, again, breaking it down with levels of disengagement and disconnection, but I think there were about 60,000 roughly disconnected young people. And the estimate in the report was that the combined cost, looking at both opportunity cost in terms of tax revenues not collected and direct expenditures, was north of $700 million.
So that's, I think that number is the number we should be using rather than
Right.
a cost is somebody who's in jail, a cost is, you know,
Yes.
700
Yeah.
million, it's a most of the
Right.
years.
Because I'll even, and to both of your points, again, and I'm saying this in the beginning, that 270,000, I'm just, and we're going to go to, I know the 700 million we want to use, but if you just think 270,000, if you just took 10% of that and allocated back into that same young man or young woman that you put into a juvenile correctional setting. And I'm trying to do the number off my head. What is that, $26,000? I mean, I don't even think they pay that per pupil in a charter school now. But $26,000 can help save a young man like myself's life, you know, that can turn it around. So, and to take one other point is, if that young man or young woman does turn around, imagine now what he was saying, the lost revenue to the state. Now I go get a job, you know, I can roughly pay $1,000 now in state income taxes, $1,000 in federal income tax. Now I'm paying Social Security, Medicare. I just named the four that we all got to pay because we know those come out of our checks. So that's that reinvestment as well, you know, when I was talking about the numbers. But that 700 million is, I think it's 770 million if I'm not mistaken, because that's my birthday. 707, so that's what it's like.
We had some more questions.
Can I come back real quick just to Lisa's question? So I just pulled up the, you know, there's more, you have it there, but just to read, so it's the at-risk and disconnected includes, that's a combined population of 14 to 26-year-olds who are either at risk of not graduating high school on time in 4 years or experiencing disconnection through limited educational attainment and low to no labor force participation. It's broken up further. You know, the at-risk include, you know, off-track, severely off-track with specific definitions, and the risk of not graduating, you know, is based on a number of factors, but including attendance. So it is all broken there, but that's the quick, high-level definition.
And that's why that 119,000 is scary to me too, because what about the ones that haven't been tracked? You know?
Yeah.
And we don't.
Yeah.
But
Other questions? I saw some hands. Sir? Yeah.
It's just, one of the issues is, kind of as a society, we don't fix anything until it becomes a big obvious problem. When something could be taken care of earlier on, we'll just ignore it, and we like flashy things. And like you're saying, if we would fix it ahead of time, we wouldn't have all these costs. But on the other hand, it's hard to convince people that those costs are there until they see it. It's like if you have a small hole in a sidewalk and you don't fix it, and then it turns into a crack, and then suddenly people complain when the whole thing is falling apart, when they could have just fixed it by just a small little patch early on.
yes.
Well, can I, I don't know whether this is responsive in any way to that. I completely agree with that. But just, it sort of triggered another thing, which is, I don't want to speak on this in partisan terms, but there are a lot of people who have been beating a drum about juvenile crime and violence, but are not advocating particularly passionately on these set of issues. And we should be, because the most obvious way in which it is completely broken is when someone commits an act of violence or an act of crime in a community. That's when you really see it. And I mean, so I think, to your analogy, I think that's right. I mean, I think we're not doing enough to help, help those young people before their accumulated trauma and all of that manifests itself in a very predictable way.
Yeah.
And I guess it's another cause for hope is that, I think some of the folks that we may need to convince that we need to invest more in this profess to care very much about juvenile crime.
Yeah.
Connect the dots for it.
Yeah.
And the preventive measure, too, is really big, like you were saying, too. One other thing, too, that, sometimes we run into and that I dislike is when something is working and, people have invested in that and then they see that it is successful, sometimes then some people will come back and just say, okay, now we don't need it anymore. Okay, so we had 100 young men and women that were at risk of going to jail or going to, they wasn't going to graduate and as the mayor was reading from the report, now these 100 young men and women, they actually do. They graduate, they get jobs, they make it, they're not going to go and recidivate or they're not going to go do a crime. We don't need it anymore. So then you'll run into this problem. The 100 that you were now going to worry about is going to multiply to about 300 when you cut those services off. So reinvesting, again, as the mayor was saying.
Well, we are past our time. The great thing about this conference, maybe not for the folks at home, but they couldn't ask questions anyway. But the great thing is you're going to see them in the halls. So if you have more questions, I know that all three of our panelists would probably be happy to engage in sidebar conversations with you. I just want to take a moment to thank them for doing this. Jeannie on very short notice. Josh, because at one of our regional panels was in the audience, and he stood up in the audience and asked questions and told his story and offered some things that were really some of the most valuable information that we got out of that panel. So we said, well, let's get him out of the audience and put him on the stage. And of course, Mayor Bronin has been really engaging in this work in a very meaningful way in the city of Hartford now for quite some time. And working very closely with Dalio Education on a variety of issues. So thank you all for doing this, and thank you all for doing
Even your police officers.